If you're a man over 60 and you've stopped masturbating, your body might already be slipping into silent decay. And the most frightening part, you may not even realize it. This isn't about pleasure, fantasy, or anything taboo. This is about function. Hormones, circulation, immunity, brain health, and yes, even your very sense of identity can slowly begin to deteriorate when you abandon one of the most natural, powerful expressions of connection with your own body. I'm not here to embarrass or sensationalize. I'm here because no one else is saying this out loud. Stopping self-intimacy in your later years can quietly sabotage your health, mentally, physically, emotionally, and sexually. I've spent over 30 years as a men's health specialist, working with older adults who often feel like they're just fading without knowing why. And more often than not, the missing link is this. They've cut off the most basic signal of life, self-touch, self-respect, and the simple act of reminding the body, I still care. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what happens inside your body when you stop masturbating after 60, not from judgment, but from science, clinical experience, and heartfelt concern. Because your independence, vitality, and sense of self may depend on it more than you ever imagined. If you're still listening, it means you're ready. Let's begin. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so and turn on the bell so you never miss another vital message about your health, strength, and dignity as you age. And if this video speaks to you, type 1 in the comments. If it doesn't, type 0. Your feedback helps me create content that truly supports your well-being. Let's begin with the first and perhaps most overlooked consequence of giving up self-intimacy as you age, one that affects millions of older men without them even knowing. It starts deep in the center of your body, in a small but powerful gland that quietly governs both your urinary flow and your sexual function. When you stop releasing regularly, this organ begins to suffer, and the symptoms can sneak up on you fast. 1. Reduced urinary function and prostate health. I remember a man in his early 70s who sat across from me with a puzzled look. "Doc," he said, "I've always been healthy, but now I'm waking up 4 or 5 times a night to pee. My stream feels weak, and I never quite feel empty. Is this just aging?" But it wasn't just aging. It was something deeper. Something he'd quietly stopped doing without realizing the cost: masturbation. You see, the prostate isn't a passive gland that just sits there. It's a living, active organ that produces fluid, contracts, and expands. And like any part of the body, when it's neglected, it begins to decline. Without regular ejaculation, that fluid can become stagnant, and when that happens, it creates the perfect environment for inflammation, swelling, and a kind of silent congestion that builds over time. This kind of internal buildup can press against the urethra, leading to a slower stream, a heavy bladder, or that constant nagging feeling that you still need to go, even after you just did. It can interrupt sleep, make long drives miserable, and even cause men to avoid social situations out of fear of not being near a restroom. What's more concerning is that nearly half of men over 60 suffer from benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH, and it often worsens when the prostate is not allowed to regularly empty. The simple act of masturbation, a few times a week, can help reduce this risk dramatically. It's not about fantasy, it's about function, keeping a vital organ healthy, active, and responsive. I've seen men regain control of their nights and confidence in their bodies simply by reconnecting with this one natural habit. But what happens when the effects of neglect don't just stay in your lower body, but start to climb upward into the most important organ of all, your brain? Let's take a look. 2. Cognitive fog and diminished mental clarity. Not long ago, I spoke with a gentleman in his late 60s, an accomplished architect who used to lead teams, solve complex designs, and speak with razor-sharp clarity. But that day, he looked down and said softly, "Doc, I walk into a room and forget why I'm there. I start a sentence and lose my words halfway through. I don't feel like myself anymore." He thought it was just old age creeping in, but as we talked more, I asked about an area of life most men overlook: his sexual habits. "It's been years," he replied. "I figured that part of me was over." Here's what many don't realize. When you stop engaging in regular sexual release, even through simple self-pleasure, you cut off one of the brain's most natural sources of clarity and vitality. During orgasm, the brain releases a surge of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, neurochemicals essential not only for mood, but for memory, focus, and motivation. These chemicals protect your neurons, boost blood flow to the brain, and calm the stress hormone cortisol, which in excess can actually damage brain cells. When this process is absent for long periods, mental sharpness fades, not overnight, but gradually. You start forgetting names, then appointments. Then you hesitate to speak because you're unsure of your own thoughts. I've seen proud, articulate men begin to second-guess themselves, fall into anxiety, or quietly withdraw from activities they once loved, not because of disease, but because their brains were starved of natural stimulation. And it's not just about chemicals. It's about testosterone, too. A man's sexual activity helps maintain hormonal balance, and testosterone plays a vital role in cognition, decision-making, and confidence. Without it, the fog gets thicker. And left unchecked, it begins to affect not only how you think, but how you feel. Because once the mind begins to dim, the heart often follows. Let's explore what happens emotionally when you shut down this part of yourself, and why the cost can be far deeper than we realize. 3. Increased depression and emotional numbness. I once sat with a retired widower in his early 70s. He was soft-spoken, polite, still carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had worked hard all his life. But when I asked him how he'd been feeling emotionally, he paused, looked away, and said, "Doc, I don't really feel much of anything anymore. Not joy, not sadness, just nothing." That answer has echoed in my mind ever since, because I've heard versions of it many times from both men and women. We often chalk it up to age, to loss, to the natural slowing down of life. But more often than not, what I see is emotional shutdown, triggered in part by the loss of one very specific thing: physical self-intimacy. Masturbation isn't just a physical act, it's a form of emotional release. During climax, your brain produces powerful hormones like oxytocin and endorphins, nature's own mood stabilizers. These chemicals fight anxiety, lift the spirit, and remind the body that it's still alive, still capable of feeling. But when you stop engaging with your body in this way, especially after a loss or major life shift, that emotional rhythm disappears. I've watched patients slowly withdraw, less interested in conversations, less engaged with family, less motivated to do the things they once loved. Their sleep becomes restless, their appetite changes, and a dull grayness seeps into daily life. Not because they're broken, but because their body and mind have lost one of their most powerful tools for balance and relief. One man told me, after resuming regular self-intimacy, it wasn't about sex, it was about feeling human again. That struck me, because the deeper truth is, when you stop touching yourself, you can start disappearing from your own emotions, your own joy, your own sense of being. But what if that emotional numbness is also stealing something else, something your body desperately needs each night to rebuild, recover, and stay strong? Let's talk about what happens to your sleep when you shut off this vital connection. 4. Reduced sleep quality. He came into my office looking exhausted, eyes sunken, shoulders heavy, voice almost a whisper. "Doc," he said, "I fall asleep just fine, but around 2 in the morning, I'm wide awake, staring at the ceiling. It's like something jolts me out of bed, and I just lay there waiting for morning." We ran every test imaginable. His labs were clean, no signs of apnea or any major issues, but something still wasn't right. Then I asked a question most doctors don't. "When was the last time you touched yourself?" He looked at the floor and replied quietly, "It's been years. I guess I thought that part of my life was behind me." What he didn't realize is that his body was still calling out for something he had stopped giving it, a natural release, not just for the prostate or the mind, but for deep, restorative sleep. When you climax, your body produces a blend of endorphins, oxytocin, and prolactin, chemicals that naturally shift your nervous system from stress into rest. Cortisol, the stress hormone, drops. Your muscles relax. Heart rate slows. Breathing deepens. You enter a state where true, healing sleep becomes possible. But when you remove this from your nightly rhythm for weeks, months, or even years, your body doesn't just forget how to rest, it fights against it. Many older men turn to sleep aids, unaware that their bodies once knew how to sleep well on their own. I've seen patients reclaim restful nights simply by reintroducing this simple, personal practice. One man told me, after just a week of reconnecting with myself, I was sleeping like I hadn't in 30 years. And that's what this is really about. Giving your body what it still remembers, what it still needs. But restful sleep is just one part of the story, because when you stop activating the muscles that support your foundation, your core, your bladder, your manhood, something far more physical starts to unravel. And you might not even notice it until it's already affecting your daily life. Let's go deeper. 5. Weakened pelvic floor and blood circulation. A retired firefighter once sat in my exam room, strong hands folded, frustration in his voice. "Doc," he said, "I can barely stand for more than 10 minutes without this strange pressure in my lower back and hips, and sometimes I don't make it to the bathroom in time." This was a man who had spent decades running into burning buildings. Now, he was afraid to walk through a grocery store without knowing where the restroom was. What he didn't know, and what many older men never get told, is that the strength of your pelvic floor and the quality of blood flow to your lower body are deeply tied to regular sexual activity. Not just intercourse, but self-stimulation. Masturbation isn't just about release. It's a kind of physical therapy for muscles most men forget they even have. During arousal and orgasm, the pelvic floor muscles contract in a rhythmic, purposeful way. This movement increases blood circulation, keeps the nerves engaged, and maintains elasticity in tissues that would otherwise grow weak. But when sexual activity fades, those muscles fall silent. Over time, that silence becomes weakness, leaks when you cough, urgency you can't control, even a slow erosion of sexual function. I've watched proud, independent men quietly adjust their routines, carrying extra clothes, mapping out bathroom stops, avoiding long walks. Not because they're lazy, but because they've lost confidence in the most basic part of their foundation, and it all started with a choice to stop listening to their bodies. One man told me, "I didn't even realize I had a pelvic floor until it started giving out on me." He thought he was just aging, but he was actually deactivating the very core of his physical support system. But the consequences of losing that connection don't stop at function and movement. Because inside your bloodstream, something even more vital begins to shift when sexual energy is ignored, something that can make the difference between staying healthy and getting sick more often than you ever used to. Let's take a closer look. 6. Weakened immunity and more frequent illness. A man in his late 60s once came to see me during a rough winter. He looked worn down, his skin pale, eyes heavy. "I used to bounce back in a day or two," he said. "Now, every little cold knocks me out for weeks." We reviewed everything, his diet, sleep, medications, but nothing seemed out of place. And then I gently asked, "Are you still engaging with yourself sexually?" He gave a half smile and shook his head. "That part of me is long gone." But what he didn't realize was that buried in that missing ritual was a quiet source of strength, his immune system's forgotten ally. During arousal and orgasm, the body releases a surge of beneficial biochemicals. One of the most important is immunoglobulin A, a key antibody that defends the body against viruses and bacteria, especially in the respiratory and digestive systems. Alongside that, oxytocin and endorphins help reduce inflammation, speed up recovery, and balance stress hormones. When that kind of stimulation is removed, especially for long stretches, the body's natural defenses begin to dull. It doesn't always show up immediately, but over time, small illnesses linger longer. Energy dips, recovery slows. You find yourself feeling off, even when everything else seems fine on paper. I've seen men who once prided themselves on their resilience start avoiding crowds, canceling trips, and accepting constant fatigue as their new normal. They didn't need more supplements. They needed to turn the switch back on in their own bodies. One woman in her 70s once told me, "I didn't know how much my body missed feeling alive until I gave it permission again." That shift, from neglect to nourishment, can change everything. But there's one final piece to this puzzle, and it goes deeper than the body or the immune system. Because when you stop touching yourself altogether, you risk losing something even more sacred, your very sense of who you are. Let's talk about that. 7. Loss of self-worth, ownership, and body. I'll never forget a quiet conversation I had with a former high school principal in his late 70s. He'd always been a proud, commanding presence, stood tall, spoke with clarity. But that day, he sat with his shoulders slightly slumped, eyes distant. "I don't feel like I live in this body anymore," he said softly. "It's like I'm just occupying it, waiting out the years." That kind of detachment doesn't happen overnight. It's subtle. It begins the moment you stop seeing your body as something worth engaging with, worth caring for. And often, it begins with the end of self-touch. Not because of shame, but because so many older men quietly decide that part of life is over. But when you stop touching yourself, you don't just give up physical sensation, you begin to lose a vital connection to your identity. Your body stops feeling like yours. You stop looking in the mirror. You stop dressing with intention. You eat without care. And little by little, you start disappearing from yourself. Self-intimacy is not about sexuality the way we understood it at 20. It's about presence. It's about reminding your nervous system and your soul that you are still here, still worthy of feeling, still worthy of being seen and respected, even if no one else is watching. I've seen people come back from that invisible place. Men who started touching themselves again, not for fantasy, but to feel alive. And I've seen what happens when that simple act restores something far more powerful than just arousal. It restores dignity. Because this is what we often forget. Your body still listens to you. It still wants to be reminded that it matters. And when you respond to that call, the results can be far greater than you imagine. So now, let's bring everything together and look at the bigger picture of what's truly at stake and what you can begin doing today to reclaim your vitality, clarity, and confidence. 8. Final words. Reclaiming intimacy. Reclaiming yourself. After decades of listening to men share their quiet struggles, many of them well into their 60s, 70s, even 80s, I've learned something that no textbook ever taught me. It's not the loss of strength or youth that hurts the most. It's the feeling of disappearing. Little by little, men stop touching their bodies, stop feeling ownership over themselves, and start accepting a dull, disconnected version of life. And it shows up in ways they never expected. Their prostate begins to swell, their mind gets foggy, sleep turns shallow, muscles weaken, illness comes more often, and the spark that once made them feel grounded in their own skin fades away. But underneath all of that is something deeper, the quiet belief that maybe their time has passed, that they no longer deserve to feel alive, to feel wanted, to feel themselves. I'm here to tell you that's not true. You don't need anyone's permission but your own. You don't need to chase your youth. You only need to care for the man you are now, the man who still breathes, still feels, still matters. Reclaiming your connection to yourself, even through something as simple as mindful touch, is not shameful. It's medicine. It's memory. It's dignity. You are not broken. You are not invisible. You are still here. So start small, start gently, but most of all, start. Your body is listening, and it's waiting for you to return.